Glad to see you all on here. Excited to get to spend a few minutes with you and talk about some compliance things. So actually, just before we get started, any specific questions, anything you need help with that way before I jump into what I've got for you? All right, I'll take that as a no. If that changes, then let me know. So what we're going to talk about today is the buyer broker. And so before that, I want to talk about a couple of things that I came across this week in regards to that. So we already had this on the list, but a couple of things that came about this week that I wanted to share with you. So first one is we had yesterday, actually, I had an agent from within, actually two agents within our company having some disagreements about when you get the buyer broker signed. So when should you get it signed? Anybody willing to participate?
I would just say before you show them any homes, for sure, do work for them.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Christine. So yeah, the idea of this, so one of the agents was saying you should get it signed, as soon as possible, basically. The other agent was saying, no, you just only have to do it right when you're writing an offer. And so first thing I wanted to share with you guys, whoops, I don't know what I just did there, is right from the division's newsletter. This was from 2019. And right here, this is out of the Kagey's Corner section here. And it says right here, all licensees who represent a client in a residential or commercial real estate sale or a property management or a lease transaction are required to have a written agency agreement prior to representing the client. So I guess the question then becomes, when are you representing the client? And somebody maybe could make an argument that it's when you're writing an offer, but I would say it's definitely going to be before that. So so just kind of, that's the first thing, is just making sure that you remember that you should do it really sooner than later. And then the second scenario that came up on that this week was and this actually happened yesterday as well.
Hey, Russ, can I just interject something really quickly?
Absolutely.
Like when you're saying as soon as possible, I think as soon as you're giving them real estate advice, so that could even be before you're showing them a house. But if you're giving them advice, that what you just read, that kind of was like an aha moment. You are acting as an agent for them if you're giving them advice.
Perfect. Yeah, that's a great way of saying it. It's just as soon as you're going to be acting as an agent for them, and really right on, just as soon as you're starting to give them advice, you're starting to create that relationship there, and you can tell that they're looking towards you that way, and you're feeling that way. Yep, I would agree. And so there's not a hard, fast rule. It just says prior to representing the client, but I would say, as soon as you feel like you're in that scenario, you want to get that taken care of. So excellent. Thanks. All right. So the second scenario that came up with this was, we have an agent in the company who had somebody sign up on their website, and they then started to communicate with this potential client. The client asked them to go show them some properties, which they then did start to go show properties to them. They found a property that they wanted to write an offer on. They wrote the offer on the property. Our agent had filled out the buyer broker with them, and actually, I believe, did that even prior to before going out to even write this offer. So they had gotten it signed pretty early on, and they started to negotiate this offer. And as soon as they got it accepted, the client then got a phone call from an agent that they had worked with almost a year ago, not quite a year ago, but almost a year ago. Just the agent was doing their follow-up, just called them and said, hey guys, just wanted to see if you were, progressing, if you wanted to go out and start looking at homes or anything. And they said, oh, we actually just got a property accepted that day, in fact. And so the agent asked, oh, well, who did you use? Which they then said, our agent. And so that agent then called our agent and said, hey, just so you know, I have a buyer broker signed with this client, and said, I will send it over to you. So the agent then sends over the buyer broker to our agent. And in the process of this too, let me back up real quick. When our agent sat down with them prior to filling out the buyer broker, asked if they had signed one of these with anybody, and they said no. So our agent did ask if, prior to signing the buyer broker, if they had signed one with somebody else. They said no, but they did say they had looked at some houses almost a year ago with an agent. So needless to say, our agent gets the offer under contract. We get a phone call from this other agent who then says, I'm going to send over the buyer broker. So they do. It was at that point that our agent called me and said, okay, here's the scenario, laid it out to me, just what I've told you guys. And then says, the funny thing is the agent sent over the buyer broker, but the clients had signed the buyer broker, the agent had not. So neither their broker, nobody from the company had signed it. So the agent sends over a buyer broker that has only signatures from the clients, nothing signed by the brokerage. So question for you guys, is that then a valid buyer broker agreement? Either unmute, throw it in the chat box, whatever.
I would say it is not a completed contract with all the signatures aren't in place.
Yeah, good. Yeah, so this is going to be one of those where you got to get signatures from both parties, just like on the buyer or seller. So just because a buyer filled out the REPC and sent it over and gave it to the seller, and even if the seller had said, yeah, we're good with that, but then never signed it, they don't really have a contract. Because again, as a reminder from real estate school, the statute of frauds says that it has to be in writing, right? So which is in writing, but not signed by the parties. So the agent then calls me from the other company yesterday and says, hey, just so you know, I've been working with these people. I had written a few offers for them. And by the way, the buyer broker was signed from April of last year to April of this year, and said, so, I was going to be really great with the agent. I told the agent that I would share the commission with them and all those kinds of things. So now keep in mind on this as well, there's two pieces to this, because one side of it is who's going to get paid on it is going to be a procuring cause issue, which is meaning you're looking at a chain of events that led to them actually getting the property. And we clearly on this are going to be the procuring cause, because we showed them the property, we wrote the offer, got everything negotiated, we did everything in this whole process. So just because somebody has a buyer broker sign does not automatically mean they're entitled to the commission. So keep that piece in mind. If the other brokerage had actually signed the contract, then at that point, they would have a leg to stand on to go back to the client saying, hey, you owe us a commission, because in the buyer broker, which I'm going to pull up and show you here in just a minute, it says that if you buy a property, that you would owe us a commission. But because they hadn't signed it, they didn't have that. So anyway, as I talked to this agent, the other piece too is just he had then obviously kept calling the clients more and more. And so when I talked to him, the agent yesterday, I did point out as well that since he had not signed a buyer broker with them, they had signed it, he hadn't, and we now had a fully executed contract. Sorry, I keep forgetting, I keep leaving little pieces out here and there, sorry. So what he did yesterday is, after our agent pointed out to him, yes, you sent us a copy of your buyer broker, but it wasn't signed by you. The agent then signed it and dated it yesterday and sent it to the client, which then panicked the client again. So that's why I said to him, the fact that you signed it and dated it yesterday and sent it, we already had one signed and dated, fully executed, which means we actually have the agency before you did. And so you're now interfering with our agency agreement. And so you could be actually having an ethical violation against you if you continue to talk to our clients. And he readily agreed, hey, I know I screwed up on this. I'm just hoping that the agent would be willing to still, share some of the commission with me like I was going to with them. So our agent said, no, I'm not going to. And I feel good about that as well. So anyway, yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Just one thing I want to make sure that we know, because we review the contracts, and there's a lot of contracts that the buyer broker or the listing contract that the agents aren't signing. So this is just one of those things where it's sometimes we don't think about it and we just don't sign those. And then we wait till closing and then it gets flagged and it gets signed. This is a scenario where this agent, did a lot of work, forgot to do one thing, sign it and communicate with his client. And now he's behind us in this transaction. So that's why I just want to make sure you guys understand that we see that a lot more than you probably realize.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Jason. And this, even if he, like I say, even if he had that sign, we would then start to have some issue. Like, no question, we're the procuring cause on this. We did what we could to try to figure out if there was another agent involved. They said there wasn't. Like, so our agent, even if he had signed it, I don't feel like had done anything wrong in that scenario. And the fact that even the agent, well, in fact, totally maybe a little different than what we're talking about, but an on procuring cause, if the client either estranges themselves from the agent or the agent abandons them, just because you have a buyer broker, you're probably still not even potentially going to get paid on that because of the abandonment. And that's where I first felt like is the fact that they were working with our agent led me to feel like they potentially had been abandoned by this other agent. But then the fact that he called yesterday, coincidence, I don't know. But anyway, just kind of on a procuring cause scenario, I think we're fine that way. But what I thought we would do today is that I'd go through and talk to you about some of the differences between our buyer broker and the one that's on the MLS, because occasionally agents will use the one on the MLS. And so I just want to point out a few differences in our contract that are not on the MLS one that you would just want to be aware of. So I'm going to share my screen here with you guys so you can see what we're looking at here. So, all right. So this is the company exclusive buyer broker agreement. And the first thing where we have a difference on our contract versus what you're seeing on the MLS is this highlighted area I've got right here. And what it says is this agreement shall automatically extend until the completion of any contracts entered into, and then as examples, purchase contract, lease, options, etc., during the terms of this agreement. If the purchase involves both lot and a new construction build, this agreement will cover both the lot and the build. So keep in mind, on the one from the MLS, it does not have that. It doesn't have the section about that it'll automatically extend. So if for some reason somebody had used the one off the MLS, the closing date was going to be after the expiration date of this, then what's going to have to happen is you need to do an addendum there to extend that out. But because our buyer broker says it will automatically extend, you're covered on that one. So any questions, thoughts on that?
A little bit.
What's that?
Will you blow it up a little bit?
Oh, yes. Sorry. Thank you. Is that better?
Yep.
Cool. All right. So the next section that I want to go through and talk about with you in terms of ours versus the MLS is on the MLS. It does not have a spot here for the plus a dollar amount. So whatever you're going to charge for the additional commissions on there, the 295 that is part of your independent contractor, you've agreed that you would collect from the client. So if you use the one from the MLS, it does not have that on there. It just has either a percentage or a flat dollar amount. So the other thing to keep in mind on this is it is part of the company brokerage fee. So you can see right here, if I can get this, so that they're agreeing to pay the brokerage fee of whatever the percentage is plus an amount. So part of what you want to keep in mind on this is that creates that to be one fee. And so sometimes people will go in and modify maybe the 295, or maybe they've done a 695, they're going to change it to 295, whatever. But in the event you do an addendum to this and address any of that, keep in mind that it is what that's really one fee. And so if you were to go in there and just say it's only 295, in essence, you've wiped out whatever you had put in there, 3% for a brokerage fee from them. Does that make sense? Am I explaining that good, Jason?
Yeah, just real quick, an example on that. An agent's charging 3% to their buyer and a 295 fee, and they decide that they want to eliminate that 295 and pay it for their client. So they write up an addendum to the buyer broker, which is the correct way to do it. And they write the words, the total brokerage fee to be, or the brokerage fee of is waived. And what they're really doing is they're waiving the whole amount instead of just the 295. So we used to a while ago call that a transaction fee or something different than what it is. But when they changed the laws in Utah, it can only collect it as commission. So its brokerage fee is the total amount. So when you do that on an addendum, just make sure you're not eliminating your full commission. You're just eliminating whatever amount you are wanting to eliminate.
Perfect. All right, next section, which this one's not really that crucial of it, but it's still good to know that we have it versus the MLS does not. And that is this sentence right here under the professional advice is just your advice to consult with an accountant if FIRPTA applies when purchasing from a foreign person or entity. And just a reminder on what FIRPTA is the Foreign Investment in Real Property Tax Act. And that was amended in 2008. So it's from 2008 till now, and going forward even still, is what that basically is saying is if a buyer purchases a home from a foreign person, so somebody who's not a citizen of the United States, the buyer is responsible to make sure that they get a tax ID number so that they would pay any capital gains taxes on that property. And in the event that they didn't do that, that the buyer is a foreign, or excuse me, the seller is a foreign person, they had a capital gain, they don't sell or they don't pay taxes on that, the buyer is now responsible for that if the buyer doesn't collect from them, or what our preference is, the title company. So it either has to be done by the buyer or a third-party representative, the title company, to collect a tax ID number for that person. So, but the buyer is responsible to make sure that happens. And in the event they didn't, the buyer would be responsible for taxes. That happened actually, not with our company, but up in Park City. This has been a few years ago, but the buyer didn't make sure the title company verified they owed taxes. The IRS came back to the buyer saying, you owe us $35,000. And because of that FIRPTA law, the Foreign Investment in Real Property Tax Act, the buyer was responsible. And I think they ended up getting the title company and ended up paying that, if I remember right. But just kind of as an FYI, that's what FIRPTA is. The next thing that is different on this is, and again, not a huge major thing, but it still is on the MLS under this entire agreement. So just to point out real quick while we're on this section, The entire agreement includes the buyer due diligence checklist form, the wire fraud alert disclosure, and any other additional addenda would be what constitutes the entire agreement. On the MLS, it strikes out this piece right here. And I think I know why they do that, but that's the only other real difference between ours and theirs. And so just remember that as part of getting this agreement done, you're also expected to have the buyer due diligence checklist and the wire fraud alert disclosure is what would constitute the entire agreement on this. So I did find one thing that was in the MLS having ours that I'm going to actually probably
Hey,
add.
Russ, can I ask you a question about that before we move past that entire agreement?
Yep, for sure.
So if we get the buyer broker signed initially before we start showing properties or whatever, is it considered complete if we don't give them the due diligence checklist and all those other things? Because typically those things are sent like once we're under contract. Like, what would you recommend about that?
So yeah, I would say that based on what this form says is that you would need to get, so at the time of you getting this signed, I would say you should also get the buyer due diligence checklist and the wire fraud alert disclosure signed as well.
And the
Okay, thank
affiliated
you.
business agreement, right?
Well, we would love to have that and we need that for sure, but that's not part of the buyer broker versus because of this section, the due diligence checklist and the wire fraud alert disclosure become part of this entire agreement. So if you didn't have it, you really don't have the entire agreement with your client. Does that answer your question, Chris? I'm gonna take that as a yes. Okay, so just as an FYI, I did find one other thing that was changed in the one on the MLS under the professional advice section that just talks about any recommendations to third-party services. And so Jason and I will get that updated on ours and then get it uploaded into .loop, but that'll probably take a couple weeks before that happens. But so anyway, that's kind of the gist of what I had for you guys today. What, any other questions, anything that we can help you with?
Russ, I've got one.
Yep.
So on the company, it says accepted by the company signature page for that part of the document.
Uh-huh.
A lot of times there is an agent and a co-agent. Is it necessary for the co-agent to sign as well, or is this sufficient with the primary agent?
Yeah, just the primary agent's fine, because the idea of it is if you look underneath, which sorry, I just quit sharing my screen, but it just says signature of authorized buyer agent or broker. So yep, you guys are all authorized to sign that.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you for what you guys do. You guys are all awesome. I
One
love-
request, if you could
Okay.
you send out a calendar invite for this? I get the text messages that come across, but a calendar invite to the agents might be helpful.
Yeah, I'll find out about that. I'm not. Were you the one that created the thing for us, Jason?
No, marketing did, so.
Yeah, we'll have to talk to marketing then and see if they can. 'Cause I'm not sure. I would assume they could send that out to all agents, but if not, we'll at least get you added, Mike.
Thanks. I think it'd be helpful just to have it to where I can forward it to the other agents on the team.
Yeah, for sure.
I agree.
Cool. Okay, well, thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Appreciate all your effort to be compliant and do what you can to keep your clients safe and protected and me protected. So thank you for all of that. Have an outstanding day. And if you need anything, let us know.
Thank
All
you,
right,
Ron.
thanks.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.